Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Turning Towards Life. This is Justin and Lizzie, and we are part of the wonderful Thirdspace. And we bring ourselves to you in conversation every Sunday morning here live on Facebook, and then all kinds of rebroadcasts happen on Spotify and Instagram and all the podcast places, and our website, which is turningtowards.life. And it's a complete delight to be here. We are here for our 400th and something week with a source chosen by Justin, which I have to say has very challenging words in it, like asymptotic, which I have no idea what it means. So Justin's going to be explaining to me some things today, I'm sure. But I'm so excited because it's about truth and it has the word encounter in relationship to truth. So I am really glad to be entering into this possibility with you, Justin, today, and thank you to you for bringing this and for always bringing completely left field sources as well. I feel really glad that whatever is coming across your desk gets shared with us all, and it's always so wide ranging and challenging and brilliant. So thank you and welcome, everyone.
Lizzie, I'm glad. I love that you think it's the 400th and something week.
It's
not quite. It's the 200th and something week. But may there be a point where we can honestly say it's the 400th and something. But it is 4 years. 4 years
maybe that's
more.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad, so grateful that we're doing this, and thank you for welcoming us and framing what we're doing and talking about the source in the way that you did. And thank you to everyone who's joining us. I want to say at this point, you can email us. You can email Justin or Lizzie or just hello@turningtowards.life if you want to be in contact with us. And I feel like I want to keep saying to everyone who's with us, if you know other people who'd benefit from this, please tell them about it, because it's really lovely to be able to spread this conversation and for it to be ever more inclusive of more and more people. And as always, here's a source that I chose, a source like thinking about sources, Lizzie, like well springs or leaping off points or the source of a river or something. So we'll dive into the river of these words from Ian McGilchrist together and then see where they take us by the end of our half an hour together. So you can always find the sources for all of you who are with us on our Facebook group, which is just Turning Towards Life, and you can ask to join, or with all the podcast postings everywhere, and on our website as well. And this is a book this is from a very big book called The Matter with Things by Ian McGilchrist. And before we read it, I don't know if you spotted, Lizzie, that I threw in the definition of asymptotic at the bottom of the source. Yes. I added it in, but maybe it didn't make very much sense. But before we read it, is when you're drawing a graph of something, there's a curve and it's sort of heading towards a particular place. It's curving, and it never, ever quite gets there. However far along the line you go, you can feel it's getting closer to the thing, but it's never going to finally arrive. That's what asymptotic is. That's buried in this quote from the poet Jan Zwicky that's in the middle of this. Okay, so here we go. I'll read it first. It's called What is Truth? Truth is an encounter. It needs to be felt in the blood and felt along the heart, in Wordsworth's famous phrase. We have become accustomed in our Western way to see all exchange of ideas as a kind of battleground in which there will be conquest and defeat. In the East, ancient truths have not commonly been thought such that they can convince. The word comes from the Latin vincere, to conquer through argument, but rather that they become appreciated. The word comes from Latin pretium, value, through a patient, disciplined opening up of the self to experience. Jan Zwicky puts it like this: truth is the asymptotic limit of sensitive attempts to be responsible to our actual experience of the world. Sensitive attempts to be responsible means truth is the result of attention, as opposed to inspection, of looking informed by love, of really looking. Though truth is always my personal judgment, it's not just possible but necessary that my judgment should take into account yours and many others. It is far from random, but is rather informed by experiment, perception, reason, intuition, and imagination.
Truth is an encounter. It needs to be felt in the blood and felt along the heart, in Wordsworth's famous phrase. We've become accustomed in our Western way to see all exchange of ideas as a kind of battleground in which there will be a conquest and defeat. In the East, ancient truths have not commonly been thought such that they can convince. The word comes from the Latin vincere, to conquer, through argument, but rather they become appreciated. The word comes from Latin pretium, value, through a patient, disciplined opening up of the self to experience. In the East, ancient truths have not commonly been thought such that they can convince through argument, but rather that they become appreciated through a patient, disciplined opening up of the self to experience. Jan Zwicky puts it like this: truth is the asymptotic limit of sensitive attempts to be responsible to our actual experience of the world. Sensitive attempts to be responsible means truth is the result of attention, as opposed to inspection, of looking informed by love, of really looking. Though truth is always my personal judgment, it is not just possible but necessary that my judgment should take into account yours and many others. It is far from random, but is rather informed by experiment, perception, reason, intuition, and imagination.
This is dense. And I realized as I was choosing it that in a way, you could probably just choose one sentence and just take one sentence. And this is actually just one tiny part of a big chapter on truth. I was so moved. It's actually the centerpiece of this that really moved me and opened me. It's Jan Zwicky's words that so I've been thinking a lot about truth and how tricky truth is at the moment in the world, all kinds of truth. And there are ways in which we, it seems to me that there are sort of two parallel movements going on in opposite directions, which this piece really addresses in a beautiful way. One way is truth is, in everything there is just one truth, one kind of truth, and it's my job is to beat you down until you agree with me. It's like truth by domination. I will convince you of what's true, and the point is for me to convince you so you give up any other idea that you have. That's sort of one kind of truth that we've got going on. And the other kind of truth we've got going on is it's true because I say so. Like whatever I say is true. My truth, there's just a million different kinds of truth. And both of those seem really destructive to me, because if I just take something really ordinary, Lizzie, like you and me being in a relationship, if I look at what happens to us when either of us take up either of those positions, either I'm going to dominate you, or in response to whatever you say, I'm just going to say, well, that's not my truth. My truth is this. It seems to me that we pull the world apart. And what both Jan Zwicky and Ian McGilchrist invite us into is that truth is a relationship. Just by starting with truth as an encounter. And right in the middle of Jan Zwicky's part is truth is us to do with sensitive attempts to be responsible to what we're actually experiencing, which means paying attention, of looking informed by love, of really looking. So if you bring me something whatever it is that seems true to you, and we want to find out what's true together. And this really does seem true to me all the times, Lizzie, when I've been in conversations with people who I care about or about things that I really care about. We find our way by not being afraid to look. In other words, by not holding on too tightly to our, it's too scary to let you in, and I'm going to have to dominate you, I'm going to have to be right, and I'm going to have to hold on. By letting go of that, but by not letting go of everything, by the thing that we hold on to and then we practice is really being brave enough to look. And I noticed in myself many times in my life where the moment I've opened myself up to really looking, the first thing that's happened is I've got really afraid. I'm really afraid about what you're going to tell me. I'm really afraid about what you're going to say. I'm really afraid to hear what it is. And so it seems so extraordinarily true to me to be invited that we could find truth together by really looking, and by looking from love, not from fear. From that kind of soft-hearted, I'm going to stay right here, I'm going to really pay attention, I'm not going to rush, I'm not going to crush, I'm not going to flee. Let's look together and talk together and listen together and keep paying attention. So the last thing I want to say for the moment is I want to come to this tricky asymptotic limit thing, which is a knowing that however close we get, we're never going to be finished. That's what that is. We can get closer and closer and closer to what's true together if we're prepared to look and listen and pay attention from love, and also know that we're never done, that there's always another move we can make together to bring us closer in. And in a way, exactly that, I think, is perhaps the most important part of this, is when we know that nobody ever has the final word on anything, that there's always more talking and attending and loving and opening and dropping our defenses and keeping going to do. We don't have to conquer anyone. We just have to keep talking and paying attention. And as I'm saying all of that, I find myself softening into this rather than hardening into this. And I think that there's something really, seems to me, in our pursuit of truth, something really important about that. Is it hard-edged, or is it can we love our way in?
It's so lovely to hear your response to these words, and so much arising. I'm having to pick a thread of sayable proportions. So Justin, the thing that's coming really strongly is I remember sitting in one of our programs, and of course the kind of conversations we're having here are the kind of conversations we have in that work. And someone said, I'm just so uncomfortable being here because in all my years of being a lawyer, all I've been trained to do is to have the answer. And this isn't an environment where the answer is appropriate, but it's all I know how to do. So I've got no idea how to be here. And I remember in that moment thinking, my goodness, this is such a hard conversation to be in because of the way we've been trained around that one version of truth that you were talking about, which is it this or is it that? And we have to put the line down somewhere, and we have to put a stake in the ground and declare that this is the truth. And you always say this so beautifully, Justin, sometimes these things are just necessary, like is the light on or off is really useful information. But we're not really talking about such simple truths as that. We're talking about complexity and the world we're in and individual human experience. And so this is a whole invitation to me, as you're saying as well, to soften into what that might mean in any given moment, in any given relationship, in any given topic that we're in. And I really love what Ian McGilchrist says about convincing and appreciation and how completely different those worlds are. And I have listened quite a lot to the radio. My husband's a massive Radio 4 person and listens to the news all the time and everything. And I find it really, really, really difficult these days to listen to people trying to convince each other of things. And it kind of hurts me to listen in lots of ways to the ones that are about debate and getting to a truth about something and challenging each other. Because mostly I feel that the people who are in there are so brilliant, but they never get to be appreciated because all that's happening is the convincing battle conquest game. And so I think, well, I would really just like to talk to that person and find out what it is they really want to say, not what the journalist thinks they should be saying, because they've probably got like incredible gifts for us and incredible learnings, but it never gets revealed in the conquest, in the convincing space. What someone really is about never gets told. So there's this kind of void of grief or something where I think surely there should be some appreciative material around things that really matter to us all as human beings, where we practice this kind of thing, which is, what if we sat there and you've got different views to me, but we get convened and hosted so that you can say the things that are true to you and I can say the things that are true to me, and we make a promise to each other that we're going to do our darndest to be affected by one another. And I'm going to appreciate what you're saying. I might even repeat it back to you to see what it means to say the words to me, even if I think they're not true. But what if we could just find the crossover bit of the Venn diagram with one another when we're really quite far away from each other, through appreciative orientation like this is inviting us into for truth. And I think this is really important because at the moment, I feel the kind of polarizing in all of us. Like, well, you're in that camp and I'm in this camp. And actually, we had some people around to dinner, which we haven't done for God knows how long. And it started out talking about, all the things of the world that are happening at the moment. And I said, listen, really, it's going to be really difficult if we sit here and write anybody off for having the thoughts and the feelings and the taking the actions that they're taking. Can we see if we can just let everyone be who they are and be curious about why they're being the way that they are in our conversation? Because otherwise it's too excruciating for me. I can't participate where we slice everything to pieces all the time. It just is too difficult now. It's happening too much. And it was interesting because it kind of changed the tone of the thing, and I got a bit feisty and just said, let's be open and not say that's not true and this is true, but let's wonder why someone thinks that's the truth and appreciate what that is, because I think the truth is for every person, isn't it? It's our entitlement. We have our own experiential truth of things, and I don't think without relationship there's any movement in any of us, and for all of us to not be movable feels really problematic to me. Like, that wouldn't be a good world if we weren't movable by everyone and our own even truths. And I say that not just between you and me, Justin, but between me and me. I have parts of me that think one thing and parts of me that think exactly the opposite thing. So I know that there's reconciliation to be done inside of me internally between the part of me that thinks one thing and the part of me that thinks something entirely contradictory. And somehow in life, we've also been told, well, we have to think one thing. I remember talking to somebody once about, well, it's our wedding anniversary today, me and Matthew. So I kind of been thinking about being married. And I remember someone saying, oh, well, apparently when you get married, you're supposed to just know. I said, my God, when I got married, there were like 27 opinions going on inside of me of like, this, I shouldn't be doing this. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I think I'm mad. I think Matthew's mad. Are we going to make it? All kinds of stuff that, was a big experience for me, of having to appreciate all the parts of me and let it all be there while my feet kept taking me in the direction of the aisle, and I think this is part of where it can be really punishing to be a human being, is to think that I have to have a truth. I have to be one thing. It's just not true. And so that when we don't allow ourselves to be contradictory, to have things that go on in multiplicity inside of us, it creates a kind of untruth, like a denial of something that can become really hard to hold and have a lot of difficulty in it. And that manifests in lots of judgment in our lives. Like if I hold a position inside of me and don't think that there's the opposite in it, and I deny that opposite, I'm pretty sure that opposite's going to come and find me on the outside of me somewhere, and I'm going to have to push it away, and I'm going to have to feel righteous. And so I can see the link both between us as humans, but so much internally as well. It doesn't feel different to me.
You, Lizzie.
Sorry, your
You
microphone takes a little while to pick up when you start talking. Yeah.
No, maybe I just need to get closer to it. Oh, well, I probably need to. I'm just going to, excuse me, everyone, whilst I just adjust something here on my settings. I think this will be much better now. As what really strikes me most, Lizzie, in listening to you is also something that is in this source that we're reading, which is that for many, many things, maybe for everything, truth is a process. It's not a thing. So even the conversation about is the light on or not, we can, by doing what Jan Zwicky and Ian McGilchrist invite us into, if you imagine with the light on, we'll just take it as it's really simple, assuming that you are able to see, and not everybody's able to see whether the light on is on or not. If we pay attention, if we are true to our actual experience of the world, if we look informed by love, and we really look, instead of holding on really tight to our opinions, if we take into account one another's judgments, not just our own, if we inform what we take to be true by experiment, we could flick the switch and see what happens. By perception, what arrives us by reason. I can see you, Lizzie, and the light's probably on. By intuition and by imagination, then we can together, by being in the process of being in relationship in this loving, attentive way, we can find out together some things that are true that we can stand on together. The light is on. Nobody needs to go and turn the light off. And we can do it in those really, really simple places that way. And I'm wondering if we learnt to practice with the really simple things, to see that that's what we were doing, was paying attention and loving and taking experience seriously and listening to one another, we would start to have much better grounds for those places where we find ourselves polarized inside as well as between one another. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, I was listening on the radio this morning before we began to a program where people were just talking about television programs that had influenced them in their childhood, and many people were talking about things they'd seen in the 1970s and 1980s, so 40 to 50 years ago, and how many things have changed in the world since then. And many of the things that had changed that they were talking about were to do with what we take to be true. And many of them that were life-giving were to do with what we take to be true about one another, based upon what's true about people who have different gender identities or different sexuality or different skin color or different ethnic backgrounds or different language or come from different places or different. And in every case where there had been a welcoming of people had become possible that wasn't possible before, I think it was to do with this. I think it was to do with our being willing to take into account one another's experience and not just say, well, I know that this person must be like this because they look like that, and to go, maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't know what it's like to be you. Maybe everything I've taken to be a rigid truth about you could be called into question. And if you and I spoke informed by experiment, perception, reason, intuition, and imagination and love, and we were willing to be sensitive to one another and to keep being sensitive to one another, we wouldn't blow apart the things that matter to us that we can stand on, but we would soften everything to an extent that we could start to let in that which we hadn't appreciated before, and that's the kind of inclusion of one another's dignity that's called for. So I was so taken by what you said about parts of yourself in this not knowing at the moment of you and Matthew getting married, of all the different, like the knowing and the not knowing and the different kinds of knowing that were going on, and how what you described was walking a path with all of that, taking one step and another step and another step. So I'm starting to see from listening to you and from being in our conversation that truth isn't a thing, it's a process. It's a path we walk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Jan Zwicky's point is, and if we walk it sensitively, we can reach towards kinds of truth that are life-giving for all of us, step by step by step, which is so different from defeating one another.
Absolutely. And also, Justin, as you're speaking, I'm feeling the relief of there not being a truth. It's like we've associated some kind of definitiveness with this word. So, like the pressure to know where you stand on something. It's like, well, I think lots of different things about this is an okay place to be if we define it as a process. You know, if I haven't landed somewhere, that's okay because I'm in the process. It's like giving permission for the process to happen rather than out of shame even, or societal, how I perceive people are judging me or something, that I have to land somewhere. You've got to know what you think about this. I feel like this is giving me permission to be in the process around finding the way and to not have to stand somewhere, because I might not be ready to. I might stand somewhere one day, but it's also okay to not stand somewhere and to be open in the not standing somewhere, and to wonder, and to, as you're saying with all of those lovely words, be in a question with all of the things of intuition and reason and relationship. It's okay to keep on keeping on until, and then if I do that, when I do take a stand for something, the stand I'm taking includes so much more than what it would have otherwise included. If I let the natural process happen and end up somewhere, it's very different than just reading an article and saying, yes, that's true. So it's kind of encouraging me to, yes, to keep reading and keep looking, but not taking each of those things as an invitation to land right now and just believe what someone says, but to go, well, that's one thing. What are the other things? What are the things that say the opposite to that? What are they? And what are the things that are somewhere in the middle? And actually, increasingly these days, Justin, I do find myself in the middle, which is like, well, I get what you're saying, and I totally get what you're saying. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle, and allowing myself to have a truth that's a middling truth rather than an extreme truth feels so far like an honest place to stand, that takes in a lot and that doesn't fall somewhere extreme where so much gets rejected. Because if I'm on one end of a polarity, the rest of the spectrum has to disappear. And the rest of the spectrum seems so filled with life and clearly other people's experience that if I excluded that, I wouldn't feel real. I wouldn't feel honest. I wouldn't feel truthful to myself. So I really am loving this conversation. And so frequently, just this thing happens where I look at the source and I think, oh my God, I've got no idea what that means. And then we get into it and I love it. And I do know what it means and we're in it. So I'm so grateful for that. And this is such a brilliant source. And thank goodness you have the capacity to bring. You told me this was like, well, look at the pages, 396, 397. That's probably in the middle of it or something, or towards the beginning. It's such a big volume. Yeah. So the fact that you have capacity for that kind of processing of words and people's gifts that they're bringing to the world, thank goodness for that as well.
Thank you, Lizzie. I'm left with this wondering about our practices around truth. So some things aren't really polarities, but many things are, where we find ourselves, whenever we find ourselves split.
Yeah.
And when they're polarities, like the polarity of breathing in and breathing out, so easy when you're breathing in. Well, breathing in is obviously the thing to do. Breathing in is the truth. And other people are going, no, 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 breathing out is the truth. And they're both right, because breathing in and breathing out, breathing is a polarity. It requires movement of both. So many things are like that. And I get left wondering from this conversation, what would it be to take up just the last paragraph as practice? That whenever we're caught in something that feels like we're holding on super strong, but we get that other people see things a different way, what would it be to take into account one another's judgments in the formation of our own? And to practice what happens if I was just comparing with what you said about reading an article and then just believing it, going with it. What if we say, well, I commit myself to experiment with this perspective with others. I commit myself to really paying attention to what I see from this place that's different. I commit to bringing my faculties of reason to this. Does this hold up? Does it hold together? And intuition and imagination. What it would be if we took responsibility and were disciplined and patient and loving and practiced our way into truth this way. I think we'd find ourselves living in a very different kind of world with one another. And that I find deeply enlightening, actually, in a time when we seem to be much, much better at trying to demolish one another with this. So yes, I'm left inspired by the kind of process that might arise from that.
Justin, can I just share one more thing? I know we're at our time, but it just feels really relevant. So I heard of this practice in a school that I know, and it's that when a child is having troubles or misbehaving, as we say, or not complying with the way things go in the school, and they're trying to show something, the group of teachers that have most encounter with the child sit in a circle and they pass something around the circle, and they keep saying what they know to be their experience of the child in an appreciative way in order to try and help them. So they're allowed to reach a conclusion, but it moves on to the next person about, well, I saw this, and actually what I can see is this. And they keep going round and round and round and round and round, focusing on one child who is at the center of the conversation, until they find a more truthful way themselves to be in the power position around the child. And then often that child's behavior shifts because of the way that the teachers then enable or stop doing things, whatever the outcomes are. It's because they have refined, processed into a deeper kind of truthfulness about the child. And I feel like that's an expression of this, that when we have a difficulty, we could, as you say, have a practice around it. and to keep talking and to keep gathering and to keep being in conversation and feeling into all the different perspectives, so that what can happen is different than what would have happened before if we'd have just stopped at they're misbehaving and they need to leave or something. So I'm really appreciating that there are people in the world who have practices like this that actually mean something in practical terms.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that in, Lizzie. There's an example of method for finding truth, of relational process. I think it's also what we've been doing our best to practice in these 200 and something conversations here between us as well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, as always, Lizzie, and everyone for being with us. And we will be back. I think we'll be back next week, but we have to check the timing. It's day after Christmas. I'm going to be here, and if you're going to be here,
I'm going to be here.
Excellent. So next Sunday we will be doing the same, and you're also welcome to join us either live or in our many recorded formats. And we'll see you then.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for being
Bye-bye,
with
everyone.
us.